here so consumers can see.
Okay. I get the honor of welcoming you tonight and before every reading. And tonight's a very special reading. We're very happy to have these two wonderful readers tonight. My name is Carol Minkiti, and my husband was Ifeanyi Minkiti, who bought this store 15 years ago from Louisa Solano. And he passed away almost 3 years ago now. And my children and I have pledged, my 4 children and I have pledged to keep this place going. We think it's sacred and we think it's beautiful and very important. So welcome and enjoy the evening. I'm sure it's a very special evening. And welcome to the Zoom people that are there. Thank you for coming.
Before our intern Fiona gives the introductions, I want to wish Carol a very happy birthday. Today is her 83rd birthday. She's our captain, and we are so grateful to you, Carol. Thank you for keeping this shop open. Happy birthday.
Hi, my name is Fiona. I'm the intern here at Grolier. I have the honor of introducing the poets tonight. Sylvia Kandé is the author of 3 collections of poetry published by Gallimard. As a historian, she specializes in the complex conversations between Africa and Europe, Africa and its diasporas, notably the issue of métissage, hybridity. A member of PEN America and the Association of the Lycée Louis-le-grand alumni, she teaches at SUNY Old Westbury in the History and Philosophy department. Her latest collection, The Never-Ending Quest for the Other Shore, an epic in 3 cantos, was published by Wesleyan earlier this year. Danielle Legros is a creative and critical writer, translator, and academic whose work crosses the fields of contemporary U.S. poetry, Black and African diasporic literature, Caribbean, Latin American, and Haitian studies, and literary translation. She has received recent fellowships and grants from MassMoCA, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and the PEN Translation Fund. She is the former Poet Laureate of Boston and a professor of creative writing at Lesley University. Her most recent book is Island Heart, published by Subpress Books in 2021, translations of the poem of Ida Faubert.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the warm welcome I'm receiving here at Grolier. I'm really delighted to be here tonight. I would like to thank for their support, my American publisher, Wesleyan University Press, my French publisher, Gallimard, as well as the translator of The Never-Ending Quest for the Other Shore, who couldn't be with us, but really brings us together tonight. Special thanks to Danielle Legros for all the care and dedication she poured into that event. And heartfelt thanks to all of you for your interest in our work. As the evening unfolds, you may notice that Danielle's work and mine, in spite of their distinctiveness, have some similarities. The most striking one being perhaps the reverence they manifest for words. Danielle and I love words for their beauty, evidently, for their strengths, but also for their accent and possibly their gender, since both of us are speakers of Roman-derived languages. I believe that we love words most of all for their agency. Indeed, words can readily lend themselves to all sorts of poetic moves, but they also know how to resist the author's intent and to make demands in terms of the temporality they prefer to exist in, the way they want to be arranged on the page, their relation with one another, and with blank space in between them and in the margins. As to me, I feel that poetry writing is both an exhilarating and humbling experience for that very reason. I had to face the words agency I just described right from the start when I wrote the incipit of what I intended to be a piece of prose. But immediately I realized through the way the phrases breathed, the elevated lexicon that imposed itself on me, the alliterations, the assonances, the grandiose scope of things, that not only was I writing poetry, but epic poetry at that. I must confess that more than once, the poem and I engaged in a tug of war. Soon enough, however, I decided to embrace its desire to be written through me as an epic poem. Yet I resisted its iron will when I felt that I had to change the pace, revisit an element, substitute a word based on its envisioned reception, etc. I must also confess that I was not ready to write epic poetry, mostly because of the nationalist and masculinist connotations associated with a genre that is generally considered as obsolete. More on my strategies later to deal with that particular issue. But since an epic poem is a long narrative piece, let me for now summarize the two stories that mirror one another in the never-ending quest for the other shore. The poem brings together the apocryphal Atlantic voyages of the 14th century West African emperor Abu Bakr II, who may have been the predecessor of the famed Mansa Musa, and the perilous journeys on boats undertaken by contemporary African migrants. As you know, since the 1990s, when more and more restrictive policies began preventing subjects of former colonies to come to Europe, a small minority of African migrants chose to cross borders through the desert or the Mediterranean that has become, as a result of this, one of the world's largest mass graves. And instead of generating a debate on migration as a human right, their efforts have been misrepresented as either an invasion, a trope of extreme right-wing discourses, or at best, and in the press specifically, as a desperate attempt to obtain shelter in the West or to possibly unduly access crumbs of its wealth. As more and more reports on migrants landing more dead than alive on European shores and pictures of capsizing boats were published, I completed a research for an essay on medievalism in Amadou Kourouma's novel. Amadou Kourouma is a writer from Ivory Coast. In the course of this research, I came across an amazing piece written by Al-Umari. A 14th century historian of Arab origin, Al-Umari transcribed the alleged conversation that took place between Mansa Musa, the 14th century Malinke emperor, on his Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, and the governor of Cairo, who was himself eager to learn about Mali, specifically its Islamic practices, the source of its abundant gold, and the way Musa ascended to power. Mansa Musa's response was that his predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, refused to believe that there was nothing behind the horizon, and that one day he decided to leave with 1,000 boats for him and his men, 1,000 more for food and water. I had now the prism I needed to show that contemporary migrants who dare cross the ocean on fragile boats embark not just for socio-economic reasons, but rather in search of knowledge about other shores and other people, in search of their own truth, and with great panache. For this is what Abubakar II did, giving up all the gold of the Mali Empire to get closer to the horizon and move beyond, a quintessentially poetic journey. He was never seen again, and it's a little bit reminiscent of the King Don Sebastian, especially seen through Fernando Pessoa's poetry. So the never-ending quest for the other shore is a middle passage poem, and it emerged from the conjunction of a pang of horror and an awe. Indeed, such hubristic enterprises, be they in the Middle Ages or today, had to be retold under the form of an epic, so that the form espouses the content and the agenda, illustrating that migrants' travel are foundational for the advent of a new humanity, what Edouard Glissant called the tout monde, and that migrants are today's unsung hero. So indeed, the poem was right in target when it pushed me towards epic as a genre. The poem is divided into 3 cantos. The 2 first ones are devoted to Abubakar II, and the third one to contemporary migrants, but together they make a single statement, which I described already. So I will now read the incipit of the first canto that begin in media res, as the medieval paddlers know that they are lost at sea and yet continue because it is useless, because it is the honorable thing to do. And you will maybe hear an echo of Suetonius' famous phrase, Ave imperator morituri te salutant, those who will die salute you. Ever since they row, songless, no heave a hoe, for how long? How to know? How many seasons, how many mirage islands the wind will sow? Did they row past pitched, drunk, and swollen with spin drift? A foggy memory of what it is to have one's feet on the ground and eyelids fluttering. They heed nothing at present, but the wave that goes, slips away, and returns. Country folk who made themselves belated mariners, their bodies cadence them to cleave with the oar's tinted tip the purple mounds of the great salt savanna, which no furrow marks, where no seed takes root, but to say the sea, earthly words are little suited. At the point of the dream, there were a myriad, no less and no more, to cross the coral barrier in laughter with its vermilion flowers. There remained but 3 barks adrift, full, so full to the point of capsizing. With paddling, their arms have become paddles, hard driven into their brown and knotted trunks, and their salt-eaten feet are now no more than stumps that cleave to the hull with the agony of 7 wounds. In their dizzying heights of suffering, they yet find the strength to row. Oh, the arrogant zeal of those who know their death approaches and prefer to gaze beyond what's certain. In the foremost boat, they row in fine unison, baron and captive, craftsman and archer. A remaining bit of color at the edge of their bitter lips, and without pause, aside from two buggers wallowing in the bilge, who cease to rumble only to hold at the borderless cloud, drooling imprecations. Their folly just now brought forth noisily displays itself. Aside also from the boy ever so young, who the pitch of the sun consumes and scorches. Yet he had promised to his beloved to return with so much affluence and luster that even his mediocre birth would be forgotten, and that he would make good his pretension to make of her at all costs his honor. I shall last upon the water. When I return, will you love me well? From the second boat, the one on duty for the dead will be requested to sink the child with the slightest ceremony, or else a few prayers, it depends. Taciturn, the other rowers are still pulling hard, all the more firmly, all the more supplely, that effort no longer has an end for now. Such torment in these trials. I often define my poem as neo-epic. I could have said post-epic as well, because I wanted to announce that I intended to disturb the assumptions that contribute to define the epic corpus, namely the glorification of an emerging nation, the center stage offered to male courage, and to war constructed as a locus where physical violence visited upon powerful enemies is the measure of heroism. So in response to that, I selected 14th century Mali because it was a loose federation of a large number of diverse people speaking various languages, whose center was actually moving and even ubiquitous. And Mali was not a nation per se. I also convinced myself that an epic does not celebrate a victory, but a defeat. And I follow on that Edouard Glissant's intuition, and that this defeat asks more pressing questions from the community it coalesces and from the others than a victory could. My box welcomed women, skilled and independent women who do not hesitate to express dissent. I even took liberty with cultural history in making a woman the griotte of the emperor. As you know, the griots are memorialists, okay? They are historians and poets at the same time. There are many types of griots, but the one that would be associated with the emperor would be generally a male. I made this person a woman. Because I had the intuition that the presence of women would help deconstruct many of the binaries inherent to traditional epics. For instance, the strict division between the forces of the good and those of the evil, on which many epic narratives rest. So could I ask you to please read an excerpt?
Well, since it's your work, why don't you stand with me? Or sit? Okay. There's a reference to a pinnace, which is a small boat, and then a pirogue, which is a long canoe.
Mm-hmm.
In the third pinnace, that of the women, another custom prevails. 4 among them have dived beneath the waterline in order to patch up the hull. Others bail out the rising water with calabashes. Beneath the canopy, a lovely lady has her russet hair braided and finds distraction in observing her lady friend's massage, while 3 girls relentlessly try to catch fish. Apart from the rest is the one whose belly refuses seed, and who wished to offer her ordeal and her youth to repay an old debt, in truth contracted by others long ago. Which is to say that despite the breaches and cracks, she holds back the swell, this tertian pirogue that strives and toils. There is laughter, prayer, rowing. There are wisecracks aplenty about men, and every kind of song. Even death is derided and unabashedly.
Thank you. My poem is also neo-epic in the sense that it responds to Edouard Glissant's call for an epic that would sing the relation, which he defined as the unpredictable ramification of chance encounter between peoples or nations. In fact, the never-ending quest for the other shore borrows a number of threads from various epic traditions from Africa and Europe mostly. It honors what they have in common, for instance, a deep sense of formulaic praise, the idea that the hero is elusive, is he heroic by virtue of being born or through his deeds? This is a question that Blanchot, for instance, examined, and of course, orality. My poem acknowledges their differences, for instance, the existence of epic songs sung by cooperative associations in West Africa, such as the Hunter. And it also looked at the complicated relationship of the epic with divinity. So Danielle, can I ask you to read two passages if time permits? In the first one, we see the construction of the boats, those 1,000 boats. I wrote the first canto and I felt that I still didn't know enough about what had happened. So I had to go back, revisit this expedition and try to look for, amplify the vision and look at what happened before they left and how the boats were constructed. I think this passage is about that. So it really reflects also the tendency for an epic poem to play on amplification, enumeration, in the passage, I believe that there is the voice of also the one who retell the story at all points. I wanted to remind the readers that this is a story being told. So you see a little bit. And the last one, in the last one, you will see a reworking in the text of Ulysses and the sirens. So as a way of bringing to the text, the epic tradition from various places. So thank you, Danielle.
So keep going. All right, so this is in the 14th century and in preparation for the journey. The 12 gates of Mali sent in abundance and without wavering tributes and emissaries, to the point that the flower of every clan was soon gathered at the shore. Under the conduct of their princes were found there argulettes and marabouts, artisans, sages, not to mention the spiritual leaders and their formidable bullies. Even a conclave of lepers had withdrawn behind a clump of trees from which they set out at night to urge one or another of your lieutenants to save them, if nothing else, at least a felucca. Rejected each time they returned to their camp, chanting an irritating refrain. Don't castigate those afflicted by the great malady. An envious man, an ungrateful woman inflicted it upon us. Don't castigate us. Jealousy is everywhere, and your turn is not far enough away. And to pass the time, regattas were organized, farces, recitations, and quarrels, entertaining tam-tams and wrestling matches. All things were bought and sold while conversing gaily, and whorls of incense rose in the guard huts. Gawkers then by the thousand and clumps of children rejoicing were there for the simple delight of wishing you welcome, and to catch a glimpse of the eagle eye, of your august countenance made up with antimony, of its aquiline nose and high cheekbones. I salute your weariness, epiphanic vulture, dreaded bird of prey none can call in. Well met and long life to you, Lord of the rain-tipped wings. You land everywhere that suits you, but only luck sits upon your head. To speak clearly and in short, your ascendancy over us, Mansa, was total. So now in the contemporary moment of the African migrants. If in the light of day we had launched, we would have seen among us, sitting askew, death, who to take up less space, crossed its legs like a saintly hypocrite, and precious to boot. Don't trouble yourself on my account. This bit of bench for my needs will suffice. It had pulled out a toothpick from its duffel. Ah, if there had been more sun, I might have found out. Painted on the hull of our bucket, between two friezes and an envoy, was displayed the name Chiron, repeated as a litany for clarity's sake. To all people of good faith embarked on the obscure waters of immemorial chaos, where the jinn furiously unravel their long lame manes, flying in the gusts of wind, 1,000 regrets, 1,000 regrets, truly. In traversing these strident cesspools, terror racked even the least timorous, who the captain had bound to a tether to check their plunge into the deep together. Those nights, Alassane, or was it Tierno, intoned long funeral laments that the void teeming with dubious mysteries echoed back to us. Sylvia Kandé. It is, I'm so moved by your words, and I'm so moved by the project of the book. It's just expanse. It's all of what it takes up and what it links as well, and its politics. So thank you for letting me read your work, Sylvie, and for sharing this space with you. Thank you, Grolier, for hosting us this evening, Carol and the Menkiti family, and James and Fiona and Elizabeth. Also thinking about Louisa Solana. So hello, hello everyone, and hello everyone here. And thanks for being with us. It's a beautiful evening. So sitting in a poetry shop, I think, one had choices, and you're here. So I'm so grateful. I'm going to be reading from my book of poem of translations. I'm just going to get my analog watch to help me keep time. And I'm going to be reading from this book entitled Island Heart. It's some poems of Ida Faubert, translated by me, published by Subpress. Thank you, Dan Bouchard, if you're out there. And Ida Faubert was a Haitian-French poet born in 1882. She lived until 1969. And so I want to share a little bit of her biography, which I hope will give you the sense of why I found her of great interest, in addition to her being a Haitian literary foremother for me. I am Haitian. She was a complex figure who didn't fit easily or conform to socially prescribed categories for women of color, whether in Haiti or in France. She was the daughter of a Haitian president, Lycée Salomon, and a French mother, Florentine Potiez. Her father was given a coup d'etat when little Ida was 6 years old, and so her family moved to France, where she was raised. And in her 1903, in her early 20s, she returned to Port-au-Prince, to Haiti, where she made an impression on members of Port-au-Prince's cultural elite because of her writing, her charm, her lineage. And she became part of an influential literary movement called Lagon, which flourished at the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century. Its poets pursued and articulated the need for a universal lyric, one that would place Haitian literature in the perceived larger stream of Francophone, particularly French letters. I mean, this could be seen as a reaction, but Haitian indigenism, negritude, and Harlem Renaissance were just being born and were not full blown at the time of the existence of this movement, La Ronde. So Faubert's poems began to appear in Haitian literary journals in 1912 under her own name, which was unusual for Haitian women writers at the time. Despite the success, she found the mores and the strictures of Port-au-Prince's high society stifling. And I think she also engaged in some reckless behavior. And so she returned to France in 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I in Europe, and also a year prior to the US invasion and subsequent occupation of Haiti, which would deeply shake Haitian society and help engender the Haitian indigenous movement. And so Jean-Price Mars, who articulated the concept of indigenism in Haiti, and Ida Faubert were great friends. And so I imagine there were some conversations, and I'd like to imagine her as being part of the birth of, or connected to the birth of the indigenous movement in Haiti. So back in France, in Paris, Faubert was a woman of letters. She attended lectures, literary events, opened up her own salon to receive artists and intellectuals, hung out on in Paris's Bohemian Left Bank, and frequented feminist and lesbian writers and spaces. And one of the reasons I was especially drawn to Faubert is because she refused the popular tropes assigned to women of color in the contemporary white European imagination. And while she didn't pronounce an overt lesbianism or queerness or overt feminism, I consider her, if not a feminist, a proto-feminist, and believe her to have been queer. And In decades following World War II, Faubert maintained contact with friends, writers, colleagues in Haiti, welcoming them when they visited France. She promoted and participated in the movement of Haitian writers and literature in Haiti and France, and is now considered one of Haiti's great women poets. So I'm going to read to you some of her poems. These poems were published in her book, Cœur des Îles, which I've translated as Island Heart. And they're written in a style that is anachronistic to the moment in which she was living, the modernist moment. She was writing in this romantic style, with evocations of nature and intense psychological states. And this is before her before her writing was informed by indigenous values. She would write short stories later in which these values are evident. So, spring morning, even though it is a spring evening. Deep along the path, the flowering canopiers disperse a fragrance, vanilla and light. A buzzing swarm of morning bees comes into the pale day, joyous, vibrating, seeking their prized pollen within the corolla. In the bright morning, butterflies take flight. A sun ray kisses the head of a rose, which stirred won't admit having lost its sleep. A perfume spreads beneath the tall palm trees, the fragrance of spring, of frenzied things. And I fill my arms with blossoming flowers, with jasmine and roses, with lilies and lilacs, and listen charmed to the water's murmur, to the birdsong in the branches. The skies are erupting, the sun is on fire, and I feel in my soul all this spring singing. Spring morning must, of course, be followed by tropical night. Now we'll read to you Faubert's original, Tropical Night, and read to you my English which will be followed by my English translation, so that you can hear in French the rhyming and the meter, the rhythm. Soir tropical. Le soir est lumineux, le soir est tendre et beau. Le soleil s'est éteinte, la lune est sur les roses. Une langueur pénètre au cœur même des choses. Les grands palmiers noirs rêvent au bord de l'eau. Les jasmins ont mêlé leurs branches étoilées aux lianes en fleurs. La laine de l'été caresse les fruits lourds. La grave volupté laisse traîner son voile au détour des allées. Là-bas, sur le chemin, pas un chant, pas un bruit. Rien ne trouble la paix d'un bonheur qu'on écoute. Viens sentir les parfums sur le bord de la route et respirer mon âme. Tropical night. The night is luminous. The night is tender and beautiful. The sun has obscured itself. The moon rests on the roses. A languor enters the very heart of things, and the tall black palms dream at the water's edge. The jasmine have mixed their star-studded branches with lianas in bloom. Summer's breath caresses the heavy fruit. The dense sensuality lets its long veil linger along the sinuous paths. Over there, on the way, not a song, not a sound. Nothing disturbs the peace of a joy we listen to. Come, take in the fragrances at the road's edge and breathe in my soul, spread across night. I think, while these are, I can't say clearly not political. I think the existence of this work is not disconnected to a political statement. That Faubert is writing on her own terms, is publishing under her own name, and is putting out these exquisite poems in the world. I think says something. All right. Faubert is a great writer of love poems. Some about the beauty of love, some about the badness of love. Badness. Mon amour, attendez. Wait, my love. When you forget that you held me captive in your arms, like a thing that was yours. When you grow tired of my sweet love, wait until night falls to tell me. Then you won't see my undone face, my sorry eyes, my trembling mouth. The dark will veil my crushing sorrow. Wait until night falls completely. Wait until the wind makes the trees wail and the birds of the woods weep in their nests. Then you won't hear my sobs or the cry of my heart, colder than marble. Wait until thunder darkens the skies and it pours nearby on the road. And in the sad night, you'll mistake, no doubt, the tears of my eyes with the tears of the sky. One day, you'll forget that you held me captive in your arms like a thing that was yours. So to tell me this, have the sweetest words. Wait, my love, until night falls. Yeah, Faubert's like that. Now, I referenced Faubert's queerness, and this is a rondel dedicated to a Madame Hergé, and things apparently did not go well with Madame Hergé. Rondel, and it's a form, and so you'll hear some repeating lines. With your bewitching eyes, whose dark beauty haunts us, with the seductive grace of the most charming fowler, you're like the lovely buds of the enchanting blue countries, with your bewitching eyes, whose dark beauty haunts us. To ease all pains, your voice is lulling, and one thinks you care, but you cause such grief with your bewitching eyes. I'm going to read one more poem, and then which will give us time for conversation. Or maybe one poem from here and then one poem from here. Sonnet à Pierre Loti, sonnet to Pierre Loti. And Pierre Loti was a French novelist and naval officer living between 1850 and 1923, who wrote in great detail of his travels. And Faubert read his novels with great interest. There's a reference to the Spahi, S-P-A-H-I, and Spahi is a member of the French cavalry recruited from North Africa. The Spahi fought, so these African soldiers fought in First and Second wars for France. Sonnet to Pierre Loti. Oh, dear artist, oh, creator of dreams, to my soul, your soul spoke. And I followed you, a sweet and sad exile, in the far-flung lands where you went restlessly. I knew the Spahi who lay heaving on the shore. I felt him die in my deserted heart, and took in his goodbye, his veiled gaze in the grave and calm hour of the rising moon. O pilgrim of anchor, I followed you. I saw the great lotuses, the pagodas of gold, the deep eyes of the saddened bells, who weep in silence and sigh soundlessly, dreaming of a joy they will never achieve. Loti, I resemble your disillusioned ones. Ida Faubert. Let's see. A stateless poem. If you are born and you are stateless, if you are born and you are homeless, if your state and home are not yours and yet everything you know, what are you? Who are you? And who am I without the dark fields I walk upon, the streets I know, the blue corners I call mine, the ones you call yours? Who am I to call myself citizen and human and free? And who are you to call yourself landed and grounded and free? And who is judge enough? Who native? Who other? Who are we who move so freely without accents of identification, without skin of identification, with all manner of identification, with gold seals of approval, with stamps of good fortune, with the accident of blameless birth? Who are we to be so lucky? Thank you. I guess we'll do a, Stevie, you wanna come up and we can.
I guess I'll start things off. How did you two meet? Would you mind telling us?
Well, I was a graduate student at NYU in the late 90s, and Sylvie was a faculty member in the French department and also in Africana. Yeah, in Africana studies, and was just doing this amazing, scholarly critical work, and still is doing this amazing scholarly and critical work. And as a woman of color, and there were not too many among the faculty, it was just so wonderful to behold this person, this mentor, this great thinker who also had this creative side to her. So that's kind of how we met, in my admiration.
Thank you.
Of you.
Very generous of you.
So translation is usually a game of trade-offs. You have to, you can't do everything. You have to maybe follow the metrical pattern, or maybe kind of dispense with that to bring the meaning in more. So what, as a translator, what sort of things do you value more to?
It's a question for you, I guess.
Yeah. Well, with this book, I decided to eschew the rhymes for what, in the interest of trying to get to as close to what I understood as the meaning of the text. And I did that for that reason, but also because the 21st century US reader, I think, is not in the habit of reading rhymed verse. So, and I wanted this text very much to exist in this moment for this moment's reader. So I was not gonna rhyme, and also because it would have been like really challenging. No, I mean, not that I couldn't do it, but it was just gonna, and I was pursuing, something else, meaning what I understand as meaning.
Yeah, I think Alexander Dicau did a wonderful job translating the text that is complex in French. I myself sort of steered away from rhymes for the very reason that you mentioned. Today it sound a little bit laborious, but instead of that, I created a system of assonances and alliteration within the voices themselves. And I think Alexander managed to keep a lot of that. Here and there, I had an Alexandrine because that's the way I was raised. and this is because the topic sort of calls for that. I purposefully made the choice to use a vocabulary, to refrain from using a vocabulary that is exclusively reserved for Africa, kind of exotic type of the huts and the chiefs, and I used another type of vocabulary, hoping to sort of decolonize, language in that manner. So I used to create temporality. I used in the first two cantos a kind of oldish French that would be still readable today, but that borrows from 16th, 17th century writers here and there. And Alexander Dicau had to contend with this language and did a wonderful job.
How did you transform that language then? Was it just in the book? Are those two cantos that are tend towards traditional French and 16th, 17th century French? How did you go gradually into a more modern French, or is it separate enough that you could do that without it being disruptive?
The third canto is a very contemporary French with some slang, in fact, because I wanted to show that the migrants who come it may not be that their first travel. It may they are in fact Africa is very much aware of Europe and the rest of the West, and the culture, the language is practiced. The slang is practiced in Africa, just like French, contemporary French has Africanized and to a large extent. So I didn't want to connote contemporary African migrants are newcomers, but people who are like us, because it may very well be that we become, climatic migrants at some point. So they are a little bit the foundational type of migrants, and I reflect that by their language. Create a medieval type of location on the sea that is by definition sort of atemporal, or although we may challenge that with what's happening to the sea today. I mean, it's very historically situated. But in order to do that, and at the same time be readable, I couldn't use Montaigne's language because, well, I mean, if you read Montaigne's the essays, I mean, there are a lot of footnotes, but I would pick up a number of terms that would sort of connote that that period, but in a kind of flow that would allow the reader to understand the sentence. And it was not done, you know, artificially. I wanted, how do you say without saying, okay, we are in 1310, you know, how do you say that? You have to sort of give the words the patina that the time puts on them. So that's what I've attempted to create.
I love that idea of patina. It's really wonderful.
I would like to say thank you to Danielle for bringing to life. And for her, she's been kept in obscurity in Asian literature. She told me. They will talk about Génération de Lagon. They will talk about the famous poet. Everybody would not know. Then a teacher much in school about so I really appreciate that. When it had the second life now to us. And I would like to say something about you mentioned the 14th century Mali. But what I'm mostly interested in, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is 13th century. The declaration, the statement of Mende, you know, for me, which I consider like is a precursor to human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights. Before the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of the 13th century, he was the slave in Mali. He was Arab slave. The slave masters were Arabs, Islamic Arabs, and so the black Malian rebels and they attacked on and they made a declaration about how human rights should be respected, which I consider myself to be a very important statement.
Yeah, so the 13th century was the time of the foundation of the Mali Empire that sort of liberated itself from the yoke of another empire of Ghana that existed before, and then under the leadership of Sundiata Keita developed, and Sundiata Keita is credited to have not only conquered land, but also established the administration and created a number of institutions, among which the caste system. And there would be a lot to say about that. So you are alluding to the chart of the Mende, and there are debates about that. Is it really a creation from the 13th century, or has it been created later on? I use part of it in the text, you know, in particular an idea such as a life is a life. Okay, which is quite powerful. And in the text that we have and that is debated today, there is an allusion to slavery and the rejection of slavery. This is a complicated issue because there was a system of domestic internal slavery in African cultures that you know, sort of coincided also with the type of Oriental slavery that you were alluded to, and came before the transatlantic slave trade, you know, starting in the 15th, 16th century. So the poem is concerned about, you know, the slavery. In fact, at some point in the passage that later on in the passage that you read, you know, I'm looking at the way people are recruited to get on the boat. Did they come on their free will, or were they pushed? Did they find some trickery not to get on the boat? I mean, all this type of situation is explored. But beyond that, you know, I'm also just throwing the idea without really developing it of what could have happened, you know, if Abu Bakr II had visited the Americas before Columbus. So, well, I'm looking at various situations. He could have been a colonizer. He could have, you know, sort of entered into an alliance, and you know, I just throw this there in a parodic way. I'm creating a parody of all those texts, you know, of conquering the land or fighting, you know, to be the one who will be the first. And in the first part, in fact, when in the section that I read first, when the mariners know that that everything is lost, Abu Bakr II, you know, takes the floor, encourages them and tells them at least we'll have avoided the fate of the conqueror, right? So thank you for your question.
Thank you for the beautiful reading tonight. Let's give the poets another round of applause. There's some books for sale. Poets will be signing books over here. Thanks for coming, everybody. If you could help move your chairs up against the wall, that'd be great.